Hello. I am Janice Maddock with Chicago Integrative Movement Specialist. I'm just going to give people a few minutes here to pop into this evening's webinar. I am super excited to have each of you here with me this evening, and I promise to make this worth your time to be here to learn a little bit more about your deep core muscles, where they are, what they do for you, why it's important to you, and how do you start to use them efficiently and effectively to help you and your body. In our follow-up session to this, Sarah, my team member on these webinar projects each month, is going to take you through how do you take the concepts we're going to talk about this evening about your deep core muscles into your exercise programs. Tonight, I'm going to show you some simple exercises you can do to help with your deep core and help yourself become more accustomed to what does that feel like. And then she's going to tell you and show you and take you through how do you start to add that into your exercise program and maybe start to modify the exercises you're currently using to help your core. And perhaps maybe you want to change some of the thoughts on why we do certain core exercises. And hopefully some of that will come out in this evening's webinar as well. So as I said, my name is Janice Maddock. I'm the director and co-owner here at Chicago Integrative Movement Specialist, as well as the Integrative Movement Institute, where we actually get an opportunity to share the integrative movement system with health and fitness professionals around the world. And we have actually started to curate, I would say is the best word, some amazing practitioners throughout the world in various locations. And so a number of them might be on with us this evening, as well as some of their clients. So we are very blessed to be surrounded by an extraordinary team of people that we're growing. They each come with their own special gifts, and we call them our family because they literally have become our family. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, we're going to talk tonight about our deeper core muscles. If you've been following our newsletters, we're going to talk specifically beyond the idea of those six-pack muscles that we see in those really lean people where they're very thin or they're very muscular and thin, and we get that idea of them being ripped. We're going to take a look at what makes that six-pack. I'm going to show you some basic anatomy about what makes that six-pack appear. However, we're also going to talk about the health related to our deeper core muscles and how that really helps when we talk about increasing our spine stability or the safety and the health of our spine, as well as our hips and other areas. I'm going to start to introduce some other concepts around our core muscles and why they're so important, how they work in conjunction with other parts of our body. So let's talk a little bit about what these core muscles are and where they are located inside your body. This guy over top of my shoulder is affectionately known as Bucky, our in-studio skeleton. And Bucky right here doesn't have any muscles, so I can't really show you muscles on Bucky, but I'm going to show you approximately where these two deeper core muscles are in your body, and then we'll outline them on ourselves together. So one muscle, the deepest muscle, is going to be your diaphragm muscle. This is also your primary muscle of respiration. We'll talk a little bit about why that is so important in a little bit. So let's first take a look at our diaphragm muscle. The diaphragm muscle itself is a dome-shaped muscle. It sits inside of your rib cage, attaches to your spine, attaches to the front side of your ribs. And when you inhale, it comes down, it flattens down this dome shape. And as you exhale, the dome shape rises up. The important key about this deep muscle is it is a round dome-shaped muscle that sits inside your rib cage, meaning it must move in a three-dimensional manner when you inhale. Okay, so it must move in a three-dimensional manner. And that's really important because oftentimes when we think about breathing, we think about belly breathing. We're going to explore that in just a little bit. The second deep muscle we're going to talk about today is what's called your transverse abdominis muscle. This transverse abdominis muscle, as it insinuates, is a transverse muscle, meaning that it runs around. Like I said, Bucky doesn't have any muscles, but this muscle attaches also inside of your spine on your inside your rib cage on the lower ribs, and also it spans long this way. And it sits and also attaches onto a portion of your hip bones, the top of your hip bones. It attaches also on a portion of your pubic bone. And then it wraps around from the front and it wraps around and attaches into what we call fascia, or the thoracolumbar fascia, and then that in turn attaches to your spine. So you can see two common things about these muscles is they're both attached to our rib cage and they're both attached to our spine. This is important when we start talking about the importance of these deep core muscles and how they help support and stabilize our spine. And that's one of their primary purposes, is to support and stabilize our spine. So we do want to make sure that they're working adequately. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm just going to give you a bigger picture of what this looks like from a more anatomical and less me showing you on Bucky what this looks like. So if for some reason you can't see a complete anatomy person in front of you showing muscles, just tell me in the comments there, but you should see a little bit of an anatomy picture in front of you. So here you can see on this anatomy person is what we would call that six pack. So as you can see here, these little outlines, that's what you call that six pack. And that's why some people sometimes will call it an eight pack. You can actually see four these red muscular parts here. And that's actually the rectus abdominis muscle. It's the most superficial, the one that lies on top. And it's the one we think about if we're going to do a crunch, right? Where we crunch up, that's what we think about working, is that muscle. Now, off to the side here, that's called the external oblique. When we think about rotation type of core exercises traditionally in the gym, that is one of the muscles that's going to work on that rotation, or those even side bending. Sometimes we think about that. That's something those muscles will absolutely do. And that's why people think about working them in that fashion. So that's two of those more superficial muscles that we think about working with more traditional core exercises. I'm going to peel back a layer now. And right here underneath where we saw that external oblique is an internal oblique. Now this one also sits and attaches in these similar locations as what we saw with that transverse abdominis. And then it also wraps around to the side as well. And that's why people think of doing side type exercises to work that muscle. But then we're going to peel back another layer. And I'm going to take off the rectus abdominis as well. And what we see here now is that transverse abdominis muscle. It does what we call interdigitates. It does this. Some of the fibers do this into that rectus abdominis muscle. It attaches on that top of our hip bone, attaches up into our ribs, but it also wraps around to the backside. And this white area that you see here is part of that thoracolumbar fascia. So it actually comes into this white stuff here that helps support that lower lumbar area and sacrum of our spine. So it comes and it blends into this. A lot of our muscles do that, and that's so important because it just tells us that it's really, really hard to separate muscles and exactly what they do, because so many of them work together. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look. So we looked at our transverse abdominis here. Sometimes we'll call it an internal corset because part of its job as well is to actually hold in our abdominal contents. It literally holds in our abdominal contents, and it works in anticipation of us moving. So if I'm going to raise my arm or I'm going to lift my leg, it anticipates the movement and it helps to stabilize the spine before we move. Now we're going to go inside of our skeleton here, and we can actually see the 3 dimensions of that diaphragm muscle. Right? You can now see the attachment of this diaphragm muscle to the front of the spine. You can see how it attaches along our ribs. And you can get this idea that it's a round muscle, a dome shape. And so when you inhale, it's going to come down. As you exhale, it's going to rise up. These two muscles will oftentimes work together to help stabilize our spine, because they too will interdigitate and work together. And we can actually see this when we go to the anatomy lab, when we work on the cadavers. I know that's not everybody's thing, but if you're a total anatomy geek like we are, it's super cool to look at. So we can actually see in the anatomy lab how these fibers actually come together, and that helps explain why when we breathe, it helps activate some of these muscles. I'm going to clue into a topic for another time, but it's just so important. I do want to highlight it in our time together here. And that is, as we come down here lower, we can see the pelvic floor muscles here. Let's look at them from the top. And I'm bringing this to your attention because the pelvic floor muscles as a group work with our diaphragm muscle when we breathe. So when we inhale and that diaphragm muscle drops down, the pelvic floor muscles work in response to that, and they move as well. And I'm going to show you why that happens in just a moment. So then as we exhale, those muscles rise up. They come down, they rise up. Another important thing to know is in the area of the diaphragm over here, your stomach is actually sits up into this area on your left side of your diaphragm, and your liver sits up here on the right side of your diaphragm. We're going to talk a little bit about that too in just a moment. So our diaphragm muscle, when we inhale, comes down. Our pelvic floor responds, it comes down. As we exhale, they rise up. When we move our arm or our leg or any type of movement, we know our transverse abdominis turns on to help stabilize our spine. Now, our diaphragm itself will help stabilize our spine as well. And that also happens through intra-abdominal pressure, right? So if we want to, when we breathe, it actually creates pressure in our abdomen, and it creates pressure up into our rib cage. As we inhale and exhale, that pressure exchange changes. You can also think of when you breathe in or you do some type of Valsalvis remover and you kind of push down, that's you using your diaphragm and bracing your abdominal muscles as well. So I'm going to stop share on this screen and we're going to go to a different screen where I'm going to show you what happens when we breathe. So this is a video from YouTube. So hopefully you can see that. So the dark, I'm just going to pause here. This dark area right here is the lungs. This right here, you'll see beating, is the heart. Now what we can't see here is the diaphragm muscle, which sits right over top of this. The vena cava of your heart actually goes through the diaphragm. If you saw those holes when I just showed you that, a picture of the diaphragm, that vena cava actually goes through there. And your esophagus as well goes through your diaphragm before it goes and attaches into your stomach. So what we're going to see is first it's going to be shallow breathing, and then it's going to be a deeper breath. And I want you to watch what happens both here in the lungs as well as here in the organs themselves. So this big organ right here, which was so interesting to me when I learned this, look how big your liver is right here. Then you have your stomach over here, and then your intestines are lower, and then on the backside we have your kidneys. So let's see what happens when we breathe in. So that's a big breath. Look how much and how far your organs move when you take in a deep breath. They move quite a distance as we breathe. That's a super big breath. That's a moderate breath. You see it just moves just a little bit. So it's telling us that that's the diaphragm pushing down as we inhale, and then as we exhale, as the diaphragm rises up, so do those organs as well. The lungs expand. That's part of the diaphragm's job, is as it pulls down, it allows the breath to go out into our lungs. I just think this is a super cool video because it really shows us how important it is that we actually breathe well, because it actually helps move our organs. So I'm going to stop share on that. So when I told you before that when you breathe in, your diaphragm muscle lowers down and so do your pelvic floor muscles, you can now see why they do that, because in between here are all of our abdominal organs or our contents. And so what happens then is as we breathe, they lower and the pelvic floor lowers in response. Okay, so that's why that's so important. So we've already covered where are these two of our deep core muscles, our transverse abdominis and our diaphragm. Their primary role is to help stabilize and support our spine. We do that, it's easy for them to do that with their attachments to the spine. Now, what goes wrong that those muscles don't work as we need them to, and we start to develop things like low back pain, urinary incontinence, hip pain, tightness, back tightness, all of these different things. What happens, and is something happening to those deep core muscles that we're no longer feeling stable or they're not helping stabilize us? Well, there's a few things that can happen. One, any type of surgery can change how those muscles work, especially surgeries of any surgeries of your spine, surgeries of the abdomen, the pelvis. So you think of C-sections, hysterectomies, gallbladder removals, appendectomies, any type of surgery to have an organ removed or an exploratory surgery, even a minimally invasive surgery to have some things like your appendix removed or your gallbladder removed, or if you've had ovarian cysts or uterine cysts, anytime they have to puncture through your abdomen, it can change how these muscles work. And I'll quote a really well-known physical therapist who specializes in women's health, Diane Lee. She actually went through having a hysterectomy and she journaled her story after doing her recovery, which this is a woman who knows her body. She knows how the body is supposed to work. And how she described it, I thought was phenomenal, because oftentimes we don't think about, especially when they use the word minimal or minimally invasive, or if you've had a C-section, they make these scars, they try to make them so minimal now, and they don't really explain to you what happened inside of your body and the trauma that you actually experienced. You may feel it, but I don't feel like the women that I've worked with over the last 20 plus years don't ever say, oh, the doctor said this is what happened to me and how traumatic it was, and it's going to take a long time for me to feel better. I don't really feel like anybody's ever told me that that's been their personal experience after any type of surgery. So what she said and how she journaled it was, she looked at herself, she did an ultrasound on her abdomen after her surgery, and she had 3 holes for the surgery into her abdomen. And she described it as, if this same incident of 3 holes being punctured into my abdomen happened in a parking lot, they would call that an assault. Sit with that for a minute. They would call that an assault, but in surgery, they call it a minimally invasive surgery. So what she found in her ultrasound of her transverse abdominis, remember that muscle that wraps around, what she found was 10 days after her surgery, the muscle was trying to turn on, it was trying to do what it needed to do, help stabilize her abdomen and her pelvis, but it was sluggish and it fatigued quickly. And this is oftentimes what we'll see with clients in our practices as well, is that their transverse abdominis may turn on, but all of a sudden we'll see some type of compensation, which leads us to believe that maybe it's not staying on, or they start to get tight and grip in more of the rest of their abdominal muscles. And so they're not able to maintain, or their body can't maintain that gentle tension that it needs. So surgery is one thing that can happen. Trauma, inflammation, if you have any kind of inflammatory issues like IBS or things like that, where your abdomen is inflamed or your intestines are inflamed, that too can be traumatic and cause trauma to the area. C-sections, hysterectomies, any type of abdominal surgery will create scar tissue. Scar tissue can inhibit the ability for those muscles to turn on as we need to. Also, another really big important thing that's not often talked about is our basic habits that we bring into our everyday life can start to change our ability to use these muscles adequately. We just think of how we breathe. How many of us feel like we, throughout our day, breathe really well? I practice breathing every single day, and I know that if I am intent on a project at my computer, where my brain is so focused for hours on my computer, I know I'm not breathing well. I am likely holding my breath. There's actually studies right now about that people are so focused on what they're doing that they actually have developed like awake type apnea, where they literally stop breathing and then they all of a sudden take a breath, like somebody who has sleep apnea. So that tells you you're probably not using your diaphragm muscle the way it needs to work on a regular basis. The great thing about breathing though, and using that diaphragm, is breathing is an automatic thing that our bodies do. It's involuntary. We will breathe, our bodies need to breathe to stay alive. However, it's also a voluntary thing that we can train. And I know lots of people say, I breathe all the time, I don't need to breathe, I can do this. However, what we're trying to show you today is you can breathe, but it's really important that you breathe well. And your diaphragm is a muscle. If you're in the gym and you're training the rest of your muscles, why would you skip training this diaphragm muscle? That seems relatively quite important when it comes to stabilizing your spine, helping keep your abdominal contents in the right place, helping you keep your abdominal organs moving as they need to. It does so many things. It works our parasympathetic nervous system to help calm us. It helps pump our blood. So it's a really important muscle that really gets downplayed just because we breathe no matter what. But here's another thing that will change how you breathe. I already said it. Your habits, how you do things will change how you breathe. Your posture will change how you breathe. And I'm going to show you a study here in a minute that talks about just changing the position of your head will change how well you're able to breathe. That's a really big deal. So another thing is how we've trained ourselves to breathe. Oftentimes we think of diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. So maybe you took a class where they said, make sure that you're really pushing into your belly. Well, remember, we have these other muscles here, like our rectus abdominis. We saw that muscle that runs here down to our pubic bone. Well, if we keep pushing our breath down into that, it will actually start to stretch out and start to lose some of its integrity. And so if you see people who are really thin, but they kind of have this paunchy belly, oftentimes they've lost their ability. Those deeper core muscles have lost the ability to hold it in. Or maybe their posture is forcing that belly out. They're having all this pressure that's pushing down into it. So we want to make sure that we are thinking of our everyday habits, how we actually do breathe. What does our posture look like? These are certain things that can change how our core muscles will work. Another thing is what we've been taught and how we put that into practice as part of our everyday habits. A common thing that we're taught is how to look slimmer or thinner. And the number one thing we're taught is to pull our abdominals in. We're taught to pull our abdominals in. I grew up as a small child being told to pull my abdominals in so that I could look thinner. So if you just think about doing that, if you want to do that with me, go ahead, pull your abdominals in, keep them in, and I want you to take a breath in, holding your abdominals in. I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like my breath stops someplace here in my chest, like I really can't get a breath in. So I'm gonna let my abdominals relax. Go ahead and do that. Let those abdominals relax, and now take a breath in. It probably felt easier to breathe with your abdominals relaxed. Did anybody find that it was not easier to breathe with your abdominals relaxed? So our habits, the basic habit of just holding my abs in is going to change how I breathe. So it's going to change how I'm using that deeper core muscle that helps stabilize my spine. So we have our habits, we have traumas or surgeries or inflammation that can change how we're able to use those deeper core muscles. Also our posture. So there's common postures too that we've been told from an aesthetic standpoint look better, or they're actually supposed to be better for us. So let's do a look at a couple of those that are going to change how those deeper core muscles work. So one of those is to stand up straight. And lots of times we're told stand up straight is to bring our shoulder, to lift our chest, bring our shoulders back. Oftentimes that's a common cue that we're told for good posture. So if you'll do that with me, I want you to lift your chest up like we've been told. Lift your chest up and bring your shoulders back. So stand tall and go ahead, keep that posture and go ahead and take a breath in again. As you do that, do you feel like you got this nice low and full breath? Possibly not. And I'll show you why in a minute. So go ahead and let that go. Relax that posture. And oftentimes when we have people relax that posture, they actually feel like they're slouching because they're so used to being so upright. But go ahead and relax that and take a breath in again. You likely, again, found it easier to breathe. And here's why. I'm going to show you, because oftentimes when we lift that chest up, we pull our shoulders back and down, it starts to change our spine. Our spine has natural curves in it. Bucky's aren't quite as natural anymore, but we do have natural curves in our spine. Especially here in our lumbar spine, we're supposed to have what they call this natural lordosis here. But what happens is once we have this posture of constantly lifting our chest up or pulling our shoulders down and back, we start to bring that lordosis higher into our spine. The problem with that is, I said it briefly, but I'm going to bring it to your attention now. Remember, that diaphragm sits right here. That diaphragm muscle sits right here. And if we start to bring that lordosis or this pattern, if you look where I'm standing, if I start to do this, I'm actually starting to make it harder to get that diaphragm to expand into my spine. The backside of the diaphragm can't move like it needs to. I need it to move like it should to help stabilize my spine. So posture can change how we're able to use our diaphragm adequately. Our muscles need to be attached to the bones in certain areas, in certain directions, and certain lines of pull to maximize how we're able to use them. So what about that transverse abdominis? How does that muscle work? Just like our diaphragm muscle, it should work naturally as we move, but oftentimes due to trauma, our habits, it will stop doing that. So there are various cues you may have heard, and we like very gentle cues, and oftentimes they sound like imagine as though. Because if I say to you, I want you to pull your belly button in, you tend to pull pretty hard to pull that belly button in, and you're actually starting to not even use a transverse, you're using more of your oblique muscles. So as we said, if you want to do this with me, that transverse abdominis attaches here into that lower part of your abdomen here, and it wraps around, it attaches onto that top of your pelvis. Before it wraps around, remember, and attaches into what we call that thoracolumbar fascia that attaches onto your spine. Well, we can do a couple different cues. There's different cues for different people. So sometimes we'll say, as you exhale, I want you to draw an imaginary line across your abdomen out towards your hip bones. So if you want to try that with me, just take a gentle breath in. As you exhale, just draw an imaginary line from the center of your abdomen out towards your hip bones. And then relax that. If you felt a big letting go, you need to imagine less. You actually start to pull in some more of those superficial or those oblique type muscles. Another cue we like to use for some people is you're going to draw a line from the middle of your sacrum here out towards the sides of your hip bones. So you're on your exhale, you're going to imagine drawing this line across this direction. And then relax. Again, if you felt a big or letting go here on the side, it was likely too much tension you were putting in there. Okay, so it's a very gentle contraction, and oftentimes you may not need that. It's definitely something you want somebody to assess for you to help you understand if that is something you need, a more cued type of activation of that transverse abdominis. What I would like to do is give you a sampling of using the diaphragm, helping you start that process if you don't already feel like you're breathing well, because remember, we do need to train that diaphragm. We need to start by getting it to expand three-dimensionally. So sometimes we need to help ourselves figure out how to do that again. Another quote by Diane Lee, this physical therapist that I love, is your brain can't train a muscle it can't find. So sometimes we need help finding that transverse abdominis. Sometimes we need help expanding that diaphragm in all the directions that it should go. So we're going to use a little bit of our brain power. We're going to use a little bit of our hands to help kinesthetically cue ourselves to train our diaphragm and that transverse abdominis. But before we do that, let's get a sense of, could you make some minor changes in how your body's moving and feeling by just changing how you're breathing a little bit, activating that transverse abdominis. Could you make some changes in how your body is moving and feeling? So if you want to do this with me, I invite you to do it because it's definitely the most important thing I think that we teach any of our clients through IMS. It's definitely the biggest, I would say, wow factor for so many people. And it's the biggest comments we get from clients, from all of us get these from our clients about they can't believe how important or the biggest changes they felt by just changing how they were breathing and actually literally just being a little bit more mindful about what they were doing with their body. So I'm going to have you stand up and I want to just take you through a brief exercise just so you can get a sense of how your body is feeling and moving. So as you stand here, go ahead and bring your arms to your sides. And I'm going to have you bring your arms straight up in front of you and then all the way up overhead and then back down. Do this again and test and see if you feel a difference from side to side. Do you feel a difference in how far one arm goes versus the other? And do your arms feel light and easy as they go up, or do they feel heavy and restricted? Next, as you stand here, I'm going to have you turn your head to look over your right shoulder, come back to center and to the left. Repeat that again. Do you feel a difference side to side? Do you feel like as you turn your head one direction or the other, that it feels sticky or stuck or maybe some discomfort as you turn your head? Then go ahead and place your hands on your hips. Your feet are relatively together. And I'm going to have you turn your whole body. I want you to stop when you feel this part of your pelvis stopping, or you feel like your feet are turning up and off the ground. Okay, so you're going to turn your body to the right, come back to center, and to the left, come back to center. And as you repeat this one side, stopping in the center, and then to the other side, do you feel a difference side to side? And what does the quality as you move and turn feel like? Does it feel smooth and easy, or does it feel as though you get stuck? Good. I'm going to go ahead and tell you to have a seat, and I want you to perch so you're sitting forward on your seat with your feet flat. Now, remember, one of the things I said is your posture will affect how well you're breathing. So we do want to make sure that your head and neck are in relatively good alignment, merely because that's the path in which the breath goes in. So if you're not in good posture or good alignment, it's going to change how easily your breath can go in and out. So from the back of your head, you're going to find this little bump of knowledge. I just want you to imagine as though there's a gentle hook being pulled up from the back of your head towards the ceiling. Okay. Now remember, we said this diaphragm moves in a three-dimensional manner. So I want you to start first by placing your hands inside your hip bones onto that softer, fleshier part of your lower abdomen. I'm going to invite you here to close your eyes so you can get a sense of where you feel your hands on your abdomen. We're always going to breathe in and out through our nose. And we're going to try to take nice, slow and gentle breaths. We're never going to force the breath in or push the breath out, because we will start to use accessory or extra muscles for respiration. So with your hands here, close your eyes. I'm just going to have you gently draw a breath in through your nose, thinking of sending that breath down towards your hands. So gently inhale and gently exhale. Let that breath come all the way out. And feel again your hands as you inhale, thinking the intention of sending that breath down towards your hands into that lower abdomen just above your pubic bone. And again, exhale gently. Feel that breath come all the way out through the tip of your nose. A nice gentle inhale down towards those hands. And a nice full gentle exhale. Let that breath come all the way out. Good. So that's one dimension of that three dimensions that the diaphragm has to move. It has to move up and down. Okay. The breath also has to go out into these ribs here. The diaphragm is going to move out this direction towards your ribs. So for that, you're going to place your hands on these ribs. I'm not on the lower ribs down here, I'm more mid ribs. For ladies, you can use your bra strap. For gentlemen, you can think about two inches down below the nipple line. You can just gently place your hands here. Again, close your eyes so your brain can connect to where your hands are. We're retraining this muscle. And you're just going to gently breathe in and think of sending that breath out towards your hands. And exhaling gently. Allow that breath to come all the way out. A nice gentle inhale. Sending that breath out to the sides towards your hands. And an exhale. Allow that breath to come all the way out. One more inhale. Out towards those hands. And an exhale. Good. Did you notice that you felt a difference side to side in how you could get your breath out there? That's not uncommon. Now we want to think about getting that breath front to back. Remember, the diaphragm sits here on the bottom of your breastbone or your sternum and attaches here onto your spine. So the breath has to go front to back as well. So if you can comfortably place one hand here and one hand on your sternum, great. If you can't, just get a sense of, if you have your bra on, get a sense of that bra strap right here. And now again, we're just going to stick with that nice gentle breath of getting that breath in between our hands. So it's going to be a nice gentle inhale, thinking of that breath going out to where we feel our hands. And a nice gentle exhale. Gently inhaling. And exhaling. One more gentle breath here. And exhale. Good. How did you do with that one? Sometimes people struggle. If you tend to be a person who has tight erectors, tight muscles back here, oftentimes getting that breath to go into the back can be more challenging. Finally, I just want you to take in 3 more breaths and just see if you can sense that breath going down, out to the sides, and front and back. Okay, so just nice and gentle, inhaling through the nose, feeling that breath going low, out to the sides, and front and back. Good, gentle inhale. Again, that breath's going low, out to the sides, front and back. And a nice full gentle exhale, just see and feel that breath coming all the way out through the tip of your nose, never pushing, just allowing the breath to gently come out. And one more breath in. And out. Good. I'm going to have you come and stand up slowly. And let's go ahead and retest what we just looked at, okay? So standing here with your arms at your sides, go ahead and bring those arms up overhead. And as you do this, remember if one side felt tighter or harder to lift, or if the arms just felt heavy. Remember, we just took 12 breaths. So sometimes people have great results, which is amazing, but do you feel any change at all in lifting your arms up overhead? Okay. Then standing here, we're going to turn the head first to look over the right shoulder, come back to center, and then the left. And as you repeat this, do you feel a difference in the ease in which your head is turning or the distance in which you're able to turn? Does it feel any more equal side to side? And then finally, bringing your feet comfortably together and placing your hands on your hips. Keeping your feet flat and stopping when you feel your hip bone stopping to turn. You're going to turn to the right, come back to center, and to the left, come back to center. As you repeat this, do you feel any changes? Does it feel easier to turn? Does it feel more equal side to side? Do you notice any less discomfort? If anybody wants to throw in the chat box, if you felt any changes, I would love to hear that from you. Because we're going to go, after this, we're going to go into activating that transverse abdominis as well, and just kind of see if that makes any changes to how your body feels and moves. Lori says better, awesome. Sarah says her arms feel lighter, awesome. Sean said he felt better with everything, that's fantastic. Oh, Tammy felt a big difference turning left plus pelvic. Awesome. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Okay, so we're just going to we're going to add in this gentle cue of this transverse abdominis. Remember, it's very gentle. Remember, as I said, and it's very important to remember this. If you feel when we're done with this transverse activation that you feel like this kind of let's go, that was too much. You're using more of those obliques in this activation. I really just want you to start with imagine as though you're pulling something this direction. Imagine as though you're pulling something this direction, okay? So that's what we're going to start with. So I want you to pick the area for your breath that you had the biggest challenge. So if it felt harder to breathe front to back, if it felt harder to breathe side to side, if it felt harder to breathe low, I want you to put your hands in those places, okay? You're going to go ahead and take in your gentle breath. You're going to start the exhale and just imagine drawing a line in your lower pelvic or abdominal area from the center out towards your hip bones. As you exhale, as you inhale, let that idea go. As you exhale again, just imagine drawing that line from the center of your abdomen out towards the hips. One last breath. As you exhale, just imagine drawing that line out towards your hips, just imagining. And relax there. Whichever of those three assessments you felt the greatest change after breathing, I want you to reassess that. So Sarah, you felt your arms felt lighter. Go ahead and reassess that. And did that gentle activation change how your arms were feeling? Did it note, Tammy, did it help anything as you turn towards the left? And once you reassess that, if you're like, hey, there was no change, then that's fine. Oh, Sarah's got a tornado warning. Okay, good. Go to the basement, Sarah. And then also make sure that, so if you turn to the left and it felt better, awesome. If there was no change, that's okay too. Now we're gonna go ahead and take that to the backside. We're gonna take that cue to the backside now. So you're going to imagine as though you're pulling a gentle string, a light string from the center of your pelvis out towards the sides. Okay, so we're just gonna do 3 breaths again. So as you're breathing in, you're just gonna make a gentle breath in. As you exhale, just imagine a light, gentle string being pulled from the center of your pelvis out towards your hips. Gentle inhale. As you exhale, one more time, just gently drawing that line from the center of your pelvis out towards the sides. One more gentle inhale. And as you exhale, drawing that out towards the sides. Good. Go ahead and stand up one more time. And let's go through those 3 again. So as you turn your head to the right, come back to center, and to the left, come back to center. Do that one more time. Do you notice a change at all with that cue for yourself? Good. And then let's test the arms. Go ahead and bring those arms up overhead. Do you notice any change in the effort or the lightness to raise those arms overhead? Do you feel a difference side to side? Good. And then last, with those hips, feet are flat. We're going to stop turning when our hips stop turning, or our feet want to come up off the floor. Turning to the right, come back to center, and to the left. Come back to center. Do you feel a change here? I think I feel the greatest change with this one. I think the back one was a better one for me. Anybody else want to share if they had a change with that? Or if it stayed the same, that's great too. Getting better or staying the same, those are both good things. So oh, thanks, Jen. Jen said hers got better. That's awesome. Oh, big change, pelvic twist, and arms feel much lighter lifting up. Awesome. Thanks, Tammy. Okay, so in today's session, we covered where are these deep core muscles? What do they do to help us? And why that's important to you. You want to make sure that these muscles are working, that you're adding them to part of your program, especially breathing. Because remember, that diaphragm muscle works together with that transverse abdominis muscle. With all of our clients, if you are a client, you know how important breathing is to the programs that we give to you, because so many of you come back telling us, I maybe didn't do all my homework, but I did do my breathing. I love that when people come back and say that, because that actually really warms my heart, because it means that they understand the importance of breathing, and that it's super easy to just make it part of your day. Do it before you go to bed at night. Do it before you wake up in the morning. But there are areas and things that will change how well you're able to use these deep core muscles, both that diaphragm muscle as well as that transverse abdominis. Remember, they include if you've had any type of abdominal or back surgery, if you've had any type of trauma to these areas, pregnancy will definitely change these as well. If you've experienced any type of inflammatory issues in your abdomen, this too will change how you're doing with these things. Also, I have noticed that for some clients, hip surgeries as well will change how well their transverse is working for them, and even sometimes how they're breathing. And that is related to, we have hip surgery, it can start to affect our pelvic floor muscles. So remember, as a side note, and for another conversation, your pelvic floor muscles work in synergy or in congruence with that diaphragm muscle. So if you're not expanding three-dimensionally, it means those muscles likely are not moving three-dimensionally. If you're someone who struggles with things like incontinence, this is a really important exercise for you to think about. There is one type of cueing or posture we didn't really talk about, which is really important for breathing as we talk about the pelvic floor working with your diaphragm. And that is if you tend to squeeze your butt, if you tend to stand or sit with your glutes squeezed even slightly, because maybe you think you don't like how your backside looks, it looks a little bit better, you feel it's a little bit thinner, doesn't stick out as much if you squeeze your glutes. Or maybe you don't even know you're doing it, which is what most clients tell me, is they don't even realize how much they're squeezing their glutes. They're standing at the kitchen sink, they're standing and brushing their teeth, and they go, now that you told me I squeeze my glutes, I realize I squeeze them all the time. That's important, because if I'm squeezing my glutes, my pelvic floor muscles cannot move like I need them to. And that means I'm not gonna be able to breathe as well if I'm squeezing my glutes. I do want to share one final thing with you, and that is a couple of studies. So this one talks about posture, and it talks about the effects of that forward head posture, which we see with so many people today, especially with all of our smart devices, that even in healthy subjects with no previous history of injury, bringing their head forward resulted in an immediate effect on their respiratory function, even for a short duration. So think of our kids today, think of us today, think of how many of us spend time at our computers and we tend to come forward, we look down at our phones. Maybe in a future session, I'll show you a picture of a young woman at the airport a few months ago. I couldn't even see her head because it was so far down looking at her phone. So something told me she probably was not using her diaphragm effectively. And this study about failed low back surgery, in failed low back surgery, the diaphragm is higher, there's less excursion, meaning the diaphragm is not moving, and it fatigues more quickly. That's what we were talking about, this back side here of the diaphragm, where it inserts into your spine or attaches to your spine there. What they found in this study is people who had failed low back surgery, that posterior, that back side of the diaphragm doesn't move as fully as it should. And when it did move, it fatigued pretty easily. which kind of comes back to our physical therapist friend, Diane Lee, what she was talking about with her surgery. What she noticed was she could do it, but it fatigued easily and it was sluggish. It didn't expand and do exactly what it needed to do. This one was actually sent in by one of our followers as a study, which I thought was great, especially as we have so many of us, like myself, have aging parents or have friends who have aging parents who are struggling with memory issues, or maybe some of us feel like we're starting to struggle with memory issues. Talks about the importance of nasal breathing to help with our memory. It actually creates this rhythm and electrical information into our brain, which enhances emotional judgment and memory recall, with this effect being most pronounced during inhalation through the nose. So I thought this was just a great study because, as I said, as we age, as we have aging parents, this becomes more evident to us how important keeping our memory and our cognitive processes are, and breathing helps with that. So I hope you got some great information today about your deeper core muscles, what they do for you, why it's important, and why it's important for you to understand where they are. So when you have folks like us helping you breathe better, why that's so important. And when you work with us, we're going to teach you how to incorporate breathing or those deeper muscles into the rest of your movement and exercise programs. If it's things for your daily life, if it's helping you become just more comfortable in feeling less discomfort in your body, if it's helping you move better through your daily life and your activities of daily living, these are all the areas that our IMS people specialize in. And so if you're working with one already, kudos to you. I know you're probably getting the results that you're looking for. If you're looking for an IMS professional near you, you can visit our website at discoverimi.com and you can locate one of our professionals right from the home page. If you have any questions about this webinar, you can feel free to reach out to me directly, and that's Janice at discoverimi.com. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. If you need help finding someone in your area, please let me know. Sue Gleason, thank you for being on. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Sarah's going to be doing the follow-up to this session on July 28th. You can join her, and how to add this more into the rest of your exercise program. She'll take you through some of that. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Janice Maddock, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.